Hi everybody, it's Julessa, and this week's video is going to be all about burrs. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for supporting my channel and helping me to grow. Second of all, if you have any comments or suggestions about the type of video that you'd like to see, I would love to hear about it in the comment sections below. So let's get on with this video about burrs. Before we get started, I wanted to say a couple of things about burrs. First of all, every jeweler uses them differently, and today's video is about the way I use the burrs myself. Now, there is kind of a right way and a wrong way to use each one of these burrs, but the fact of the matter is, however you decide to use them is how you should use them. The second thing is, this video is intended to be a generalized version of what burrs are for and kind of how to use them or what they're actually used for. My intent is to have future videos that are very specific to each and every one of the burrs. That way you have a better idea of how to physically use them in your flex shaft and how to use them in stone setting. So with that being said, let's go back to the bench and talk about these burrs individually. The first burr I'd like to talk about today is a ball burr. As its name suggests, it's shaped like a ball, and it has a cutting edge all around the outside, even the bottom, a little bit on the top. This is probably one of the most frequently used burrs in my studio because I use it for a lot of different things. Not only do I use it for stone setting, but I also use it for decorative effects and to chamfer some holes for riveting or just for decorative. This ring is an example of two things. First, the stone setting, which is a flush set, and second is a decorative effect on the holes that I cut with my jeweler saw. The ball burr actually does a couple of things in the decorative effect. It will even out your holes if you didn't get them perfectly straight while you were sawing, and it also creates a countersink so that you have a nicely finished hole that will look more professional. The second most used burr in my studio is a heart burr, and a heart burr is shaped just like a stone, a faceted stone. It's got a pavilion, it has a girdle, and it even has a top pavilion, although the cutting edge is more so the pavilion on the bottom and the girdle edge. I use this for several different types of stone setting. I use it first of all in a prong setting to open up the seat so that I can press the prongs over the top of the stone. The second use for it is in my flush setting, like I showed you before on this ring. I use a drill to open the hole, then I use a ball burr to open the seat just a little bit, and then finally I'll use a heart burr to open the seat the final part of the way. And this particular use requires that you find a heart burr that is the same diameter of your stone. That way, when you go to press your stone in place, it's the same size as the actual stone itself. The other thing I use this for is a decorative effect. I'll use the side of the burr to drill into my metal and create little slats, and that will actually create reflections in your metal and give you a little bit of texture. The other thing I use a heart burr for is a pave setting. And in a pave setting, it's just like a flush setting. I would use it as the final step in opening my seat so that I can create a seat where my stone will sit flush. And as long as I've drilled straight down, it'll keep the stones flat and flush up against my walls here. The other thing that it does is similar to a prong setting, is it opens up the seat on these tiny little balls here, or tabs, whatever you want to call them, and it makes the stone snap into place, and then I can press over the excess metal and create these little bead-shaped prongs. The next burr I'd like to talk about is the stone setting burr, and this stone setting burr is a typical burr that you'll see. It has a pavilion and it's got a girdle. And if you notice here, the girdle is pretty tall, and that's because this is designed to work in tube settings. And this is a tube setting. So I would take this burr and drill down in my tube and create a sidewall that's straight up and down, just like the girdle of this burr itself. Once I've done that, I can press my stone into place and then push the walls over the top of the stone. This is another example of a tube setting. I use the setting burr to open up the seat of the larger stone here. And then I've also used a ball burr and a heart burr for my flesh settings here. The next burr I'd like to talk about is a cylinder burr. And a cylinder burr is just like the name suggests. It's shaped like a cylinder. It's got a cutting edge that's along the outside edge of the cylinder, and it will cut in this direction. And what I use this for is twofold. First, I'll use it in a bezel setting. And the way I use it in my bezel setting is after my soldering is done, there's sometimes some excess solder in the bottom of the bezel and in the back plate. So this burr will actually help me to remove the excess solder and flatten out my bottom portion of the bezel. That makes it easier for the stone to set flat, and then I can press my edges over the top without having to worry about it not being even. The other thing I use a cylinder burr for is in my pave settings. And what this does is it opens the side of the setting on each one of these stones to create an opening in order to get the most light reflected down onto my stone. This can also be used for decorative effects, and the way I use that is in the side of a bezel. If I want this side to be scalloped and I don't have a scalloped bezel wire, I can take my cylinder burr and cut scallops into my bezel. And because it's round, they turn into scallops. The next burr I'd like to talk about is called a cup burr. And as the name suggests on this one, the burr itself is shaped like a cup, and the cutting edge is on the inside of the cup itself. And what this is used for is in a prong setting. You can use it to smooth off the top of your prongs. It doesn't have to be used to smooth the top of your prongs. You can use files and you can use sandpaper to do the same thing. But if you have a cup burr, it goes a little bit faster and creates a more consistent smoothed edge around all of your different prongs. You can also use this burr to round off the ends of wire. For example, if you're making fish hook earrings, the end of the wire that goes through the ear can be rounded off. That way it doesn't catch as it's going through. And the other thing you can use this for is rounding off the tops of rivets, the tops of granules, and the tops of anything that is round or spherical in nature that can need some smoothing off, or even just to provide consistency between the shapes and the sizes of your granules themselves. The last burr in this series is called a cone burr or a bud burr. And just like the name, it looks like a cone, or it looks like a bud, a flower bud. And it has a cutting edge all along the outside edge and then also at the very tip. And this one has been used for decorative effects mostly in my studio, but because it's a little unruly and the cutting edge is a little bit sharp, or I guess the cutting edge is a little bit more rough is the best term for it. It's a little bit unruly, and it tends to take off too much metal too quickly, so I don't use this very often. Although you will see some jewelers will use this to open seats to do flush settings, and they'll use it to open up the seats in a prong setting. But like I said, for me, it takes off a little bit too much material too quickly, so I don't use this very often. As a matter of fact, this is the only one I even have. So let's recap. These are the most commonly used burrs in my studio. First, there's the ball burr. It opens seats and creates decorative effects. Next, there is the heart burr, which I use for flush setting and prong setting, and it's also used for decorative effects in metal. Next is the cylinder burr, and the cylinder burr cuts open my sidewalls of my pave settings, and it also helps to clean up the inside of a bezel setting. Next is the setting burr, which is primarily used for tube setting, and it really doesn't have any decorative effect use, but I guess you could probably use it if you figure out how. I don't know how to use it that way. I use it only for my tube settings, so this is not used quite as frequently as a ball burr or a heart burr. Next is the cup burr. You use that on the ends of your prongs, the ends of wire, and even on granules to make them a more consistent size. And that really is the only uses for it. You can't use it for decorative effects because it just doesn't cut on the outside edge. It only cuts from the inside. And last, we have the bud burr or the cone burr, which is used sometimes to open the seat of settings and also for decorative effects. And as I said before, it's a little bit too unruly for my taste, so I don't use it very often. This week's video was all about burrs and their general purposes and general uses. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and if you have any questions or comments or concerns, I'd love to hear about them in the comment section below. Or if you even have suggestions for more videos, I would love to hear that as well. Thank you again to all of my subscribers. I truly appreciate your support for this channel, and I look forward to creating more videos for you. Bye everybody, I'll see you next week.